Okay.
Welcome to Bruce Hurwitz Presents Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Bruce Hurwitz of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing. You can find us on the web at hsstaffing.com. I hope you'll consider us for all your staffing, career counseling, and professional writing needs. I am delighted that I will be shortly joined by Dr. Dominique Padurano. We will be discussing college admissions for the high school class of 2024. Meet the Experts is sponsored by P&K CPAs. P&K is a full-service accounting firm. They provide accounting and consulting services to businesses ranging from startups to small and mid-cap companies to nonprofits, as well as high-net-worth individuals. Contact them today for a free consultation at info@pk-cpas.com or call them at 973-882-8810. They will be happy to be of service. Dr. P, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bruce. I'm so happy to be here.
It is my pleasure. Please take a moment or two and introduce yourself to our viewers.
Hi. Well, as Bruce mentioned, my name's Dr. P. My longer name is Dominique Padurano. The doctor is from a Ph.D. in history. And I was a teacher at the high school level for about 10 years. And in 2014, I left that profession and started my own small business, Crimson Coaching, which provides academic tutoring, test prep, and college counseling to students worldwide.
So your doctorate is in history, mine's in international relations, but we'll still keep to the topic. We won't get into history.
Good, good.
If we had done this maybe 6 months ago, the top jobs in demand, at least around here, were the trades: plumbers, carpenters, electricians. I looked it up to see where we stand right now, and we've got nurses, maintenance, physical therapists, managers, sales is always in demand, engineers, and software engineers. And what surprises me is that it doesn't include IT people, especially for cybersecurity. Now, what all of these have in common, and I think it's true also for nurses, they don't need 4-year degrees. So why should someone choose to go to college and not to a technical school for a year, 2 years, and then join the labor force?
I think that's a great question. And I'll start off by saying, I don't think that 4-year colleges are right for every student coming out of high school. There are people who are much sort of better suited by temperament, by skills, to go directly either into an apprenticeship program or into trade school. That said, for students who do want a 4-year degree, or at least want to try to get that bachelor's, I think that while often people coming out, going directly into a profession might earn more money in the short term, studies do show that over the long haul of a person's career, students with a bachelor's do earn more than high school diplomas. And then, of course, students with master's and PhDs more than them. So, of course, the bachelor's is the entree into those graduate level jobs as well. That's just the professional aspect. Then there's also, hopefully, the intellectual and personal aspect. Many students also go to sort of find their tribe at college. They go to find the people that they're going to marry, or find the people who will become their best friends for life. That's certainly one reason to go. And then a third reason to go is to have your mind blown. And this is sort of coming from Ron Lieber's book, The Price You Pay for College. He's a personal finance columnist for the New York Times, and he's identified these 3 reasons why people go to college. And none of them is wrong or right, but it is important that students identify what's the main reason they want to go to college when they're looking at colleges to put on their list.
I'm surprised you didn't mention building a network.
Well, that to me, that would fit in between finding one's tribe and professional, right? It's kind of straddling those both, depending on how. But I mean, those are basically the three main. And I mean, building a network, if one wants to go into academia, that would also happen to be with the going in the having your mind blown category.
Now, I know you went to Harvard,
Uh-huh.
and I don't mean to pick on you, but the example that I have is a real example, and the guy went to Harvard.
Okay.
I was shocked by his behavior, by his limited abilities. I thought better. And I was talking to someone about it, and I didn't know that he had also gone to Harvard. And he looked at me and he said, Bruce, everybody who gets into Harvard is smart. They can pass the tests. They get in. Half, and it's an old joke about doctors, but half graduate in the bottom 50% of their class.
Of course.
Of course. And then he said something else. He said, once you get the degree, then you've got the degree. You're a Harvard MBA, you're a Harvard lawyer, you're a Harvard physician. You can get lazy. And a case that I had was I was looking to fill a position, a marketing position. I had someone with a Harvard MBA and someone with an MBA from a community college. And the guy from Harvard hadn't done anything in his first job. He just did what he was supposed to do, worked 9 to 5, and that was it. The guy from the community college was really impressive. And when the two of them were looking for their next stage in their career, by coincidence, they came to me. And the guy that got the job was the one from the community college. So how can you really rank a school just because they say it's a top tier like Harvard? Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to prepare you for that second job. It might get you your first job, but not necessarily your second if you don't learn how to work.
I think that's absolutely true. And you said, how can they rank? I'm not sure who the they is, but if the they,
students who are high school graduates,
Mhm.
class of 2020, can't believe it's already 24, class of 24, when they're sitting down, do they want the prestige of Harvard or do they want the prestige of the Dominique Community College?
Well, I don't own my own community
I'm
college.
just
When I do, I'll let you know. But so I think your point is a valid one, and I, as a college counselor, never ever recommend picking colleges based on prestige. It could be one of many factors, but and that is based on values. And I have an extensive questionnaire that I give to both parents and students to answer separately on what their values are when I am curating a college list for them. I do not rely on lists like the US News and World Report ranking, which is the most culturally popular, and which I think, when you mentioned students, families who perhaps aren't working with a counselor like me, they might just go to the internet and say, what's the best college for X, right? Or they might just say, what's the best college, which I think is an even broader and less helpful search than saying what's the right college for business, for example. But it really, when I'm going back and curating a list, I really start with what's your main objective for college? Is it to have your mind blown? Is it professional advancement? is it finding that tribe? And that's where we start. And then, of course, there are many other factors. What part of the country the student might want to live in, how big of a school the student is comfortable in, what are the class sizes do they like? Do they like small seminars, or do they like to be one of a 300 in a lecture hall, right? All of these things go into making a student happy at college, and happiness is not to be underrated. Very few students actually graduate in 4 years now. In fact, so few graduate in 4 years that the benchmark is now how many students graduate from the college in 6 years. And that's partially a function of the enormous expense that college represents. And many students need to take time off to work in order to save up more money to continue. And it's also a function of the fact that many students need to take time off when they're not happy. And so getting it right the first time is both a savings of time and a savings of money on the family and the student's part. And I think that prestige of a college is never something that should be top on their list of criteria by which to judge colleges to apply.
There are two things that intrigue me. Take them one at a time. First, the parents. What is the role of the parent in choosing the university, college, what have you, for their child? What should the role be, and what shouldn't the role be? In other words, when should mom and dad stay out of it?
Right. So what is the role? I think that varies according to families. Some parents are very hands-off. Some parents are very hands-on. What should be the role, according to my views, I think is necessarily going to differ from most families. I think the ideal parent will set some realistic parameters for the student, but not just in the 12th grade when they're picking out colleges, but starting in 9th grade to say, this is how much money we can dedicate to your college degree. And you're welcome to go to a college that might be more expensive than that, but you might also want to start applying now for scholarships. And, that's something that students don't often realize they can start doing. Believe it or not, there are scholarships out there for kindergartners on up. And so students can start amassing money towards college at a very young age. But I think it's really the responsibility of parents to be very upfront with their child no later than 10th grade about, this is what we can afford. And factored into that should also be the cost of trips home. So, I know, for example, when I applied to college a very long time ago, I got in to Stanford, and I was a silly 17-year-old and thought I'd be going to school on the beach in California. And my father, who was a New York City police officer and didn't want me to go away to California, said, don't think you're coming home every Thanksgiving, every break. You're getting one plane ticket there and one plane ticket home. And that's really why I chose Harvard. It was the power of the purse. Now, I'm not suggesting that parents be that coercive today. This was 1989 after all. But I do think it's important for parents to be realistic with their child about just how much they can afford, so that there's not this stick. I have seen not families who work with me, but other families who the kid will get into NYU, for example, and then it's devastating because the parents can't afford NYU. So I'm not sure why that conversation wasn't had years before the child even applied.
Second thing you said, getting it right the first time.
Mm-hmm.
So you haven't gotten it right the first time. You went to wherever. You realize you made a mistake. How do you correct it?
Well, I'm working with two students who are transferring. Both happen to be for medical reasons, and sometimes there are medical reasons that force a child to have to live closer to home than they originally anticipated. And I would say that whether it's proximity that forces you to make another choice, whether it's these are not really my people, I thought they were going to be, or I wasn't really up for this level of academic challenge and I want a more relaxed environment. Whatever your first year experience was, I would always advise families, try not to view that as a total waste. You gathered valuable experience and knowledge at that first year. And so now you have another opportunity to rectify that and make your second choice more appropriate for whatever reason that second choice needs to be made.
Does the school in which the student is transferring consider them, forget about health reasons,
Mm-hmm.
consider them to be a failure?
No, not at all. And I think it's quite common for students to transfer, especially now, during the pandemic, many students went to two-year colleges because parents didn't want to pay the $75,000 price tag of a liberal arts four-year school if children were just going to be in their bedrooms going to school by distance learning. So, colleges more than ever are used to transfer students and they don't view them at all as a failure. However, I do think it's important. This is where essay coaching comes in, and you as a professional writer know this as well. It's important to spin one's experiences, not lie about the first year, but to try to present that first year as the learning experience that it was, and a time of gathering insights into one's strengths and likes, so that now the college is really the right one, right? So I would never tell a student to concentrate on the negative. You're not going to lie, but concentrate on the positive instead.
The old song, you have to accentuate the positive and eliminate the negative.
Exactly.
Now, we've touched on briefly where to go. What about what to study? A lot of people don't have a clue. And when they ask me, I say, I don't care what your major is, your minor has to be English. Because if you cannot communicate well, doesn't matter what job you're going to have. You can't communicate well, you will not advance. So make sure your English is next to perfect.
I would add as well, if you're at a school where writing is valued, I didn't major in English. I majored in a humanities subject, though, art history, and I had to write a ton of papers and wrote an 80-page thesis at Harvard. And so I do know how to write and learned how to research there as well. That being said, the first thing I really think is important is to follow your passion, because you're going to be spending a lot of time studying in that topic. And so make sure it's something you like and not just something that mom or dad is steering you towards. That said, because the cost of a college education is so astronomical these days, it is important that you look at, well, what type of job could I get when I graduate? And I think it's important that students do a real deep dive into what's going to be my return on investment, the ROI on this. So if I can only get out of school, with a art history degree making $40,000 versus computer science making $80,000, well, I'll be able to pay off my loans a lot more quickly if I get the CS job, right? That said, I would say probably one of the hottest majors that I've seen for both boys and girls in the last 5 years is computer science. And so because of that, it's now much more difficult to get into schools with if you declare that you want to major in computer science. And some schools make you declare upon applying. Some schools you don't have to declare your major. But I would say in general, more than any other major, most students at 17 are still undecided. And I would just say, make sure that you go to a college that gives you at least a year to decide, and that also will allow you flexibility to potentially transfer between colleges. So what I mean by that is at large universities, like, for example, State University of New York at Binghamton, they have College of Engineering, a College of Liberal Arts, and at some of these places, you can easily transfer, but at others you can't. You're locked into the college that you applied to. And if you're undecided, you know, I've seen someone who unfortunately decided to stick it out at Binghamton because he liked his friends there, but really had to major in something that he no longer wished to major in because he couldn't transfer.
There's another side to it. If a subject is very popular, computer science, then it's safe to assume that in, for sake of argument, 4 years, there's going to be an excess of computer scientists looking for work, and you're going to have a lot of competition, and the salaries might go down.
Maybe not, though. It depends, you know, Adam Smith's law of supply and demand. You know, we see with the advent of ChatGPT and other AI chatbots, I think there's still going to be a growing demand for programmers.
Well, I just used that as an example. Could be anything.
Right. But you know, you can certainly do deep dive research into job forecasting on what types of job, you know, if you're planning on graduating in 2030, what types of jobs do they anticipate being hot in 2030? And think about that, particularly if your main reason for attending college is professional advancement.
Not finally, I'll have one more question for you.
Sure.
But savings. When I was a fundraiser, I had a gentleman who set up a trust. And he said the beneficiary would be so-and-so. And I said, who is so-and-so? And he said, my grandson. And I said, why? So he'll have money for college. And I said, no, you don't do that. That's not good. Because he would have to declare that he has this income. And then it may preclude him from getting a scholarship. You may not be doing him a favor. And I said, but I'm no financial advisor. Go check with your financial advisor. Next day, the financial advisor called me up and said, thank you. He wouldn't listen to me. He listened to you. So they found another way. They put the money aside, and when he graduated, he probably got the money. The savings plans,
529s.
529. Thank you. Any opinions?
It's so funny you mentioned this because my monthly newsletter that just went out yesterday, called on a riff on the 12 days of Christmas. It was called the 12 days of affording college, because the free financial aid form, or the FAFSA, was renovated by the federal government and is due out on December 31st, which is a big deal. It's supposedly making applying for financial aid a lot easier for families, a lot more speedy of a process. And my newsletter literally started, and it's also on my blog later on if people want to check that out, but it starts, I'm no financial planner, but yeah, I mean, I think for sure starting a 529 is a great idea because it helps lower the individual who's investing their tax liability. So for example, I just opened one for my baby niece, and my tax liability will be lowered because of the contribution. And then I can sign, when she turns 18, I can sign all that money over to her. But there are lots of other ways, including, scholarships, including, little known things like, for example, taking the SAT or ACT. Many parents think now, since COVID, so many schools have gone test optional, and they think that means, oh, I don't need to take the SAT. You don't have to, but a lot of times if you want a scholarship, you need to submit a score. And so this rush, parents are sometimes ill-informed, and they kind of let their kids off the hook with studying for the SAT, and that really hurts them in the financial aid department 2 years later.
Now, for my final question, I am going to share your contact information.
Great.
And I will make us magically appear. Final question.
Yes.
Is there anything that I did not ask you that you wish I had asked you? And if I had asked you, what would you have said?
That's a great question. Just that I would say, a lot of times people think, well, I applied for college alone. I didn't, have a counselor. Why does anybody need an essay coach or a counselor? And I would just say, college admissions is such a more complicated game than when at least I applied in 1988, and it's even more complicated than 2008. And so having somebody who knows things like, for example, you should take the SAT because that may mean more scholarship later on. There might be a very small investment in the short term, but the return on investment, can be very great. I had a student who they spent $2,000 on a coaching package 10 years ago, and he got a full ride to school, which was $240,000 total. So,
Okay.
yeah, Wall Street's not giving those returns.
Yeah.
So, I do think, and moreover, and it's not just the monetary angle. Having somebody to calm nerves on both the parent and student side can make this a time of self-exploration for the child. And they can really make meaning of their last 3 or 4 years and figure out where they want to go for the next 3 or 4 years. And that's something that often is difficult for parents to do with their own children because they're so close. So it's easier for someone like me who's a little bit farther away.
Dr. P, I want to thank you for joining us. You've provided really valuable information, and I'm sure the parents and hopefully some students listening and watching will appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Bruce. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you. I'm Bruce Hurwitz. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay focused on success.